Section 1. Personal Recollections of Early Melbourne and Victoria. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. This reading by Lucy Burgoyne. Personal Recollections of Early Melbourne and Victoria by William Westgarth. Section 1. Oh, call back yesterday, bid time return. Richard II. A story of the mount and plain, the lake, the river, and the sea. A voice that wakes to life again, an age-long slumbering melody. George Gordon McRae. Ah, who has ever journeyed on a glorious summer night through the weird Australian bushland without feelings of delight? The dense untrodden forest, in the moonlight cold and pale, brings before our wondering eyes again the dreams of fairy tale. A. Patchett Martin. The genius of Australia now uprears her youthful form like hope without hope's fears, while o'er her head our cross, with loveliest rays, heralds the brightness of her future years. R. H. Horne. An introductory medley. Pleasure and action make the hours seem short. Othello. I had long looked forward to one more visit to Victoria, perhaps the last I should expect to make, and the opportunity of the opening of the great centenary exhibition at Melbourne on 1st August of this year was too good to be lost. Accordingly, having been able to arrange business matters for so long a holiday, I took passage, with my wife and daughter, by the good steamship Coptic of the shore, Savile New Zealand Line, as it is curtly put. She was to land us at Hobart about 27th July, in good time, we hoped, to get across by the Launceston boat for the exhibition opening, and she bids fair, at this moment, to keep her engagement. We would have taken the directer route, with its greater number and variety of objects, via Suez and Colombo, but we feared the sun blaze of the ill-omened Red Sea in summer. We purpose, however, to return that way towards the coming winter. More than 31 years have elapsed since I left Melbourne, after a residence there of 17 years, broken, however, by 2 intermediate visits home. I think with wondering enjoyment of what I am to see in the colony and its capital after such an interval. Previously, when I returned after only a year or two absence, I was wont to mark with astonishment all that had been done in that comparatively brief time. I am thankful to Mr. Froude, whose delighted work, Oceana, I could read to all full enjoyment during the leisure and quiet of the voyage, for somewhat preparing me for what I have to see, for I must infer from his graphic accounts, especially of interior progress, while already 3 more years have since elapsed, that even my most sanguine anticipations will be exceeded. Our great Scottish poet and novelist has finely said: "Lives there a man with soul so dead, who never to himself hath said, 'This is my own, my native land'?" But is there not a formidable rival to the force of this sentiment in that with which one clings to the land where so many of the most vigorous years of life have been actively spent? And a land, besides, of surpassing sunny beauty and of rare romance. Business calls are usually held to be imperative, even if they send us, 'willing or unwilling,' to Ultima Thule or the Pole, Accordingly, my later lot has been to return to the older, and not to continue in the newer, part of the common empire. But, at any rate, that rather enhances the enjoyment of this revisit. According to the usual custom, I now write my introduction last of all. I have most pleasantly occupied several hours of the complete leisure of each day in writing these recollections, and now, as we get within almost hours of our destination, I am putting this last hand to my labours. I cannot hope that their light sketchiness can go for much, save with those who, familiar with the great Melbourne and Victoria of to-day, may enjoy the comparison of the small things of a retrospect extending to almost half a century, and all but to the birth of the colony. The voyage has been extremely pleasant, with a good and well-found vessel, fairly fast as the briskly competitive speed of these days goes, and above all with a head in Captain Burton, who has proved first class in every requirement. He has just complimented us by saying that we are the best behaved lot of passengers he ever took. That was due very greatly to himself, and I think that all of us are well able to reciprocate his compliment by regarding him as the best of captains. Officers and crew also have been, to our view at least, faultless, but then again, all that so much depends upon the captain. Touching the important matter of speed, let me say a little. All important it is, indeed, in this age of fast progress. When I first sailed for Australia in 1840, we were, I think, 141 days on the way. Nor was that a very inordinate passage then. This time I expect, within that interval, to go and return, besides having nearly 2.5 months to spare, a space of time which now, with rails and fast steamers everywhere, will enable me to visit all south eastern Australasia, including even New Zealand. Of course that means hardly more than to see, but still that is better than not to see at all, those wonderful parts of our empire. But yet again on this point of speed, our Coptic's daily run average rather under 300 nautical miles. In justice to the good ship, we should credit her with rather more, for during the latter half of the voyage she was meeting or anticipating the sun by 6 or 7 degrees of longitude daily, and thus clipping about half an hour off each day. But turn now to the latest like exploit between Liverpool and New York, the case, I think, of the SS Umbria, whose unprecedented record is of 455 to 503 miles daily. Granting this to be subject to abatement for running this time away from the sun, and thus prolonging the day, there is enough of difference to give us, at this speed, the hope of a 3 weeks' Australian service by the straightest available line. It has already been effected to Adelaide in 29 days. We Australians must hope that ere long Melbourne and Sydney, together with all about them, will weigh, with ourselves at least, as heavily as New York. The coal question is, of course, an awful difficulty for 3 weeks instead of 5 to 6 days, but not, we hope, insuperable. Our Coptic burns but 50 tons a day, but the New York liners require 300. When a man has passed 73, as I have done, he may be excused in doubting his chance of yet another Australian visit. But while he has been waiting these many years, He has seen such vast improvement in intercommunication facilities of every kind, as to establish, he might say, a complete counterbalance to the increasing infirmities of years. Imagine, therefore, the Australian liner of the next few years to be a great and comfortable hotel, as though one went for 3 weeks' fresh sea air to Brighton or Bournemouth, with the additional charm that, on quitting your pleasant marine apartments, you stepped out upon Australia. This brings up yet another subject. When attending, 4 years ago, the very successful and most interesting meeting of the British Association at Montreal, I was very curious as to the possible prospect, now that this body has made so good a first outside step, of a like meeting in Australia. But, not very long after, an invitation to the association was actually sent from Melbourne. The year asked for had been pre-engaged for home. My distinguished friend, Mr. Service, told me when on his late home visit that no doubt the invitation would go again. I may usefully mention here that the association is usually engaged, or as good as engaged, 2 clear years in advance, so that the 3rd year at least in advance should be dealt with for Melbourne. This besides would afford sufficient notice for the busy men of all classes and all vocations at home to arrange conveniently for the necessarily long absence. I do not doubt of complete success. Indeed, it is such a further chance as that which might tempt even the oldest of us into visiting the far off but bright and sunny south. Section 2.